Have you ever gone into a conversation with the best of intentions on what you're wanting to communicate and it all goes sideways? Well, then this video is for you, because today I'm going to talk about messy communication and why it's actually okay. Hey everyone, I'm Sonia. Welcome. On this channel, I give you tips around attachment style healing and relationships and communication. And today I'm going to cover messy communication because, lots of these videos, including some of mine, are really trying to emphasize how we can improve our communication skills, which can go a long way in our relationships towards easing problems, towards understanding each other better, towards better intimacy. And there are lots of these tips that can be super helpful. But what if you get in there, you're in the situation and things don't go exactly as planned? And I would say, to different extents, sometimes it goes really sideways and sometimes it's just a little bit. Honestly, I think it's like 99% of the time that's actually true. And so I want to cover some of the ways this might look today and a little bit about what you can do about them as well. Okay, so here are 8 ways that your communication might be super messy. So number 1, I'm calling takebacks. And I'm saying takebacks because it means that you went into the situation, into the communication that you wanted to have, let's say with your partner, and you said something right off the bat, maybe even, that you regretted. So maybe it's simply that you were going to use your I statements and you were going to say, I feel this way because of this happening. And instead you said, you never do your share in the household. So you made it right away kind of a blamey sort of thing. Or maybe something even devolved into name calling at some point when you were triggered. We don't like to feel like that's okay. And, it really isn't. But what can you do about it if it happens? Because it is going to occasionally happen. Let's say you called your partner a baby or, something like somewhat mild, but also pretty rude. So what you're going to want to do is try to catch it in the moment that it's coming out. So we're making the assumption that it did come out already, but the faster that you can, maybe it's even as you hear it coming out of your mouth, the faster that you catch it in the sense of saying, whoa, I didn't mean to say that, apologizing potentially. So if it's the name calling, certainly apologizing. Let's say it's the accusatory thing, like you can just say, hey, I did not mean to say it like that and come off so accusatory. It's just that I'm so frustrated. So try to slip it into more of that, not official I statement, but what the I message would be trying to get across, which is that you are feeling a certain way because of the situation, but trying to make it clear that you hadn't meant to come across that way. I mean, is it going to still be perfect that you did accidentally say something like that? I mean, maybe not, because your partner could very well get triggered, right? But it's going to definitely go a long ways the faster you catch it and the faster that you try to explain where that was coming from, that you didn't mean it, and all those different pieces of it. Because the more, it's really expressing vulnerability there, that you messed up. And the more vulnerable we are, the other person's going to have an easier time of it in just then opening back up to us and having compassion for us. So the number 2 way that you might have messy communication despite your best intentions is your tone. So tone can be really hard in the moment to control, but it is possible to try. And so I would say if you notice that your tone is not sounding the way you want, to see if you can change it. And so try breathing from your diaphragm. Try lowering the pitch of your voice, because often our pitch is becoming higher or at least more strident sounding. And so if you can lower that, that can help. And I would say try pretending that you are speaking in a soothing voice on purpose, like you're actually saying something soothing to someone. And I'm not saying this to get you out of what you're trying to do. That becomes a little analytical with controlling your tone. And, you still want to be in the moment communicating with the person. But it's more like I'm thinking of that as a reset. So if you can use a moment of imagining that to reset the tone, then often the tone will proceed from there, at least for a while, depending on how things go. So that can be one way to try to help with the issue of if your tone is not coming out the way that you would have hoped. And I will have a caveat here, which is that sometimes when we try to control our tone, we can sound like a coiled snake about to strike. So what do I mean by that? I mean, that's, like if you think of someone saying their parent or their teacher, they always knew when they were mad because they got quieter or something like that, right? There can be sort of this ominous kind of quieter, calmer tone thing going on. So you don't want that. So that's why I was saying if you do something like you're thinking of it more as a soothing tone, that may help with the situation. So the third way that your conversation might get messy and not go the way you want is that it has to do with overall intensity. So it could be that you're speaking faster. That's one way. It could be about your body language. Let me cover both of those. So if it's about sort of how stridently and how fast you're speaking, you can try to slow it down. You can take some more breaths. Just focus on slowing it down. So that can be one way to do it. If it's about your body language, check for things like uncrossing your arms. And, you can still have a confident, assertive stance. You can have your chest out, shoulders back. And actually that might help, because another thing that I want to suggest besides uncrossing your arms and noticing your body language in ways like that is to really feel like your heart is open. And so if it helps you to sort of imagine that, like I'm opening my heart to my partner in this moment, go ahead and do that. See if that can help you to relax your body stance and have a more open stance. So a fourth way that you might have a messy conversation, despite your best intentions going in, is that you might forget how you were going to say it. Maybe you had practiced a way of saying it that was a gentler way to ease in and wouldn't trigger your partner, or whatever that is. Maybe your words sort of fail you. So my advice here is just to let them know, I'm going to say this and it's going to be messy. And let them know that you may have to sort of change what you're saying as you say it because you feel like you're blanking out and you just want to say it to the messy. Because hopefully going in, they will realize that will be the case and sort of expect it to have something that you're going to change going in. The caveat here is, of course, if messy and how it's just coming out messy includes things that you really shouldn't be saying to them in the sense of being accusatory or name calling or something like that, you're going to have to loop back up to my suggestion for number one and apologize still. So really, I mean, saying things messy and they're not quite what you wanted to get across and you're trying to correct that. If it comes out more as, things that are accusatory or not as kind towards your partner, then that's going to be a different situation where you'll want to apologize and make amends right then and there. So the fifth way a conversation might go sideways or get really messy despite your best intentions, I'm calling TMI. So why is it too much information? Well, maybe you had discovered something about yourself, like some resentment you were having, for example, and you actually hadn't meant to share it because you didn't actually feel that related to what was happening in the actual issue at hand, but the resentment had been your clue maybe that you needed to address the issue, but you didn't feel like you needed to even bother bringing up that's how you'd figured that out about yourself. And then when you go in, you end up just saying that. You just ended up sharing what you didn't intend to share. And so that sort of becomes part of the conversation that, that you'd been feeling resentful. And then, they know that, right? So I would suggest that in the moment, see if you can change it up a little bit. So see if you can nuance that wording. So let's say you said you're resentful. See if you can say, but really now I'm feeling this. And then explain what you did figure out. Like, I realized that resentment wasn't really directly connected to this as much as just a clue to help me understand that we needed to talk about this issue. So if they understand that that's not how you're feeling right now, or that you figured out something about it and it's much more nuanced than that, then that will help a lot. So it's like if it comes out, the TMI, then you're going to need to go into a lot more explanation so that they can be on the same page as you. And the reason that's important is because, if you go in and you say, I've been feeling resentful, because it could go the direction of them thinking that you are more in a stance of trying to justify your resentment, for example, like I'm feeling resentful and these are the reasons. And if that wasn't your intention, and your intention was to come in and talk about an issue and the resentment was just a clue, then they need to understand that as well, because they might take what you're saying very differently and take your stance and your intentions very differently. So the sixth way that a conversation that you have with someone like your partner might go a bit sideways or might not go the way you want is that you might forget some key points that you wanted to bring in. And so my suggestion here is, if you feel like you're forgetting something and you just can't access it right in the moment because maybe the emotions are high, you're dealing with also your partner's response at the same time, just let them know that. So again, it's kind of a transparency thing here. Let them know, I feel like I'm forgetting something. And so I just want to say that because, we're figuring all this out, and I'm worried that then I'm going to think of the thing and then it's going to change things. So I just want you to know that until I remember what this is, this may not be like completely resolved. And so that can go a long way towards having that sort of caveat about that you want to bring in the thing later, even though you're not remembering it right in the moment. And then, setting them up for the fact that you may need to have a further conversation down the line, which is probably good advice in general anyway, because sometimes we don't realize we forgot something, right? So it's always good at the end of a conversation to say, we'll have a check-in further about this, or maybe we each need to process or think about things a bit more to see if there's something more we want to add into the conversation. And this leads right into number 7, about how a conversation can go sideways or messy or just not the way it was intended, even if you have planned it somewhat in advance and have certain intentions going in. And that is not having an answer to the response that the other person has. So let's say it's your partner and they respond to what you said in a completely different way than you expected. Maybe it's more positive than what you expected. Maybe it's just you hadn't realized they were thinking of it in a completely different way. Whatever that is, if you don't have a response in the moment, that could happen, like I said, because it's unexpected, but it could also just happen because some of us need more time to process information and to even understand how we feel about it. That's definitely been true for me, especially before, when I was an unhealed FA, that it took me a long time. I had sort of a delay, often sometimes even of days, before I realized how I felt about something that had happened. So I think in that case, it can be important, 2 things. It can be important if you realize that in the moment, just to say it. And so then your partner realizes that you need some more time to respond to them. And then the other piece is that if you just always try to have check-ins later about conversations that you've had, then you allow for that, even if you don't realize that that's what's happening in the moment, that you aren't fully able to respond yet. And then number 8 for how a conversation could go very messy is getting triggered. So there have sort of maybe been pieces of that in some of the other ones that I mentioned, but let's just say you notice you are getting triggered, you feel the, emotional dysregulation. So what then? So if it's a complete, dysregulation, and you really know it, and you really know it, or you see that that's true, it can be nice if you can see that for each other, if you're partners. Because sometimes the person in the moment, it's hard to even know that's where you're at when you're fully triggered. But in those moments, it would be important to wait and have the conversation later. But let's say you're just starting to notice that you're going that direction. It's not quite a full-on trigger yet. What can you do then? So in that case, I would definitely let your partner know what's happening, that you're starting to feel a bit triggered, and then see if you can regulate more, see if you can go a little slower, see if you can take some breaths. And then mentioning maybe already to your partner, though, that you may need to take more time, or that you may need to have the conversation later. So I think in sum, a lot of what you can do about any of these is to be pretty transparent, because then the other person knows what's going on with you. They know, what you're trying to do. They can feel more compassion for you as they see you trying to do it, even if you're being messy about it. And then they can understand where you're coming from or what your intentions are. So transparency is really important. And that, I would say, goes along with vulnerability, because it can be vulnerable to be that transparent, right? And also, it's a bit more about really pacing yourself. So breathing, kind of noticing if you're triggered, and those kind of things. So pacing yourself and being in the moment and noticing where you're at as you have the conversation. So those are kind of the 2 key features that are important, and then knowing that you can have the conversation later. I think sometimes, it's hard not to really, really build it up if we've prepared for a conversation, especially, and we really are trying hard in both communicating and in how we're going to communicate. So it's important to go in knowing that maybe this isn't going to be the only conversation. And it probably shouldn't be, right? Like I said, we should probably have check-ins later anyway. So hopefully, even though you might want to feel like you want to get it over with, that can in a way also ease your mind that it doesn't have to be perfect when you're going to do it in this particular conversation. And honestly, it won't be, right? For some pieces of all of what I just said are probably going to crop up in any conversation. And so let's try to let ourselves off the hook with being perfect about it. Totally different to understand things. We learn just even by these kinds of preparations, and it gets us into our best intentions better, right? But we're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. So I hope that was helpful. I am open now for one-on-one coaching, so if you want a little more help in your relationship or with your attachment style, please let me know. You can find the link for that down below. And I do 20-minute free consultations to make sure about what resources I can offer you, if I can point you to other resources as well. And I do have an occasional newsletter that I started, so if you want to get on that list, that is also below the link for that. You do get a free PDF checklist and worksheet if you're feeling unfulfilled in a relationship when you sign up for that. And let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about a conversation, if you're willing to share about a conversation you had that went sideways, or if there's other ways that you've noticed that they can go sideways.